All right, welcome back. We roll along talking about the Penguins and Predators. Penguins up 2-1, can make it 3-1 tomorrow night. Before I get into lineup changes, one of the interesting subplots here, Andrew, is PK Subban, who not only guaranteed a win last night, and which is, some people didn't like, some people did like, but also afterwards claimed that Sidney Crosby told him he had bad breath. And today, Sidney Crosby said he never said that. He lied about it. Just your take on Subban and his role here.
I've absolutely loved the kind of gamesmanship we've seen from him off the ice. I think what he did before Game 3 took pressure off of Pekka Rinne. Instead of Rinne being the total disaster, more the focus was on Subban kind of having his Joe Namath moment. And as far as last night went, I like it. I mean, again, you're getting Sidney Crosby to talk about things and think about things that he really shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, how can you not? Especially if you're a Nashville fan, you have to love it. Subban's been in a bigger, much more kind of hockey mad and true pressure market in Montreal. He knows how to take the pressure off guys because he also knows how to handle it. And the fact that Sidney Crosby, who of course wanted no part of it, actually had to address the bad breath thing means he's getting into his kitchen a little bit. Like Crosby, he didn't want to talk about that at all. If I'm a Nashville fan, I love it, and Subban's good enough to back it up, and they did.
I think if you're a hockey fan, I don't know how you can't love PK Subban. Just the way that he plays, the spirit he plays with, and this kind of stuff, guaranteeing a victory, and then they go out and win it. This stuff with Sidney Crosby, all the things that he does, and then he's a really good player on top of that. I mean, if he was not a very good player, then he would just be a blowhard idiot, and we would laugh at him. But he's a really good player who has put the bullseye on his back so that it's not on Rennie's back and it's not on the rest of his team's back. I don't know how you can't love him no matter who you root for.
So Mike Sullivan has been good at coming back after losses, making necessary changes. Chris, what does he do tomorrow? Does he keep the lineup the way it is? Kuhnhackl's been skating a little bit. You also have Ruhwedel and Streit, who hasn't been used, but Ron Hainsey struggled a little bit. Would you make a change there?
I would consider it with Ron Hainsey for sure. He looked so slow on that first Nashville goal. I mean, him not getting to that puck and being able to make a decisive, crisp play there is what started the entire sequence that led to it. So I'd consider him, man, more than anything else. Kuhnhackl is a good speed guy. I don't know if that's necessarily something that they desperately need. I would consider Ruhwedel, though, because Hainsey just doesn't look like he's got the step to deal with some of the pressure plays you need to make.
I think these coaches like Mike Sullivan. I think the coaches like Hainsey probably more than we do. Look at all the minutes he gets. Him and Dumoulin are the top minutes guys on their blue line. I think of the play Hainsey made to spring Gensel on that goal in Game 2. He gets to a puck and flicks it to him in the neutral zone. So I think he stays in. I would keep him in. I think the big one's Bonino. Their big advantage at center is depleted when he's not out. And if he's close to, 60, 70%, I give him a chance to play.
Well, my thought on that would be if he's 60 or 70%, give him, because Game 5 is what, Thursday?
Yeah.
You're giving him basically 4 more days to rest, and then you've got him for the rest of the series. I would actually consider that. The thing I love about Mike Sullivan is every single game, he keeps everyone's toes sort of, they know that there's going to be subtle changes, and he always seems to make the right one.
Right.
Whether it's bringing a guy like Hainsey out and using Streit, even though we'll all say, you're going to do Streit? What, are you out of your mind? And then he goes out and plays a great game, or dropping someone from the third line to the fourth line, and all of a sudden, the third line guy scores, a goal and has an assist, and it's like, he just pushes the right button. So there will be some subtle changes. I don't think it'll be overhaul or anything like that, but there'll be a couple of subtle changes that will make a difference tomorrow.
I would agree with Andrew, too. I think they like Hainsey a lot more, the staff does, than maybe the average fan or analyst does, or think that he does a better job than the average fan thinks Ron Hainsey's doing. So I don't think he's actually going to come out. I would do it, but I don't think he will. And I think Sullivan's best changes that he makes are going to be those subtle tactical ones that you don't even notice during the game, or an in-game line switch just to jumpstart somebody or the other. I think he's a master both of the in-game change and the thing that you can actually get on the grease board at practice in between games and figure out.
So he's the anti-Dan Biles move.
He is as anti-Biles. Oh, my God, get to our game. Throw 27 stretch passes a period, and if none of them work, it doesn't matter because we're going to get to our game tomorrow, even if tonight's Game 7.
All right, real quick, we're going to have a little bit for this segment, but it's playing at Bridgestone Arena, which has been a big advantage. I mean, home ice is a big advantage for all the teams. The Penguins have utilized it. But nobody has as big a one as what we've seen this year at Nashville. So, Andrew, how big is it? Is it real? Do you think it plays a role?
Yeah,
in their success?
With apologies to the Richie Walshes of the world here, I don't think that you're going into a sterile, neutral environment when you play in Nashville. Home teams in the playoffs are 45-39, which is slightly better than 500. Nashville's 8-1 at home. Now, how is a team that was 500 in the regular season that much better at home. I think there's an effect, there's a lift, whatever it is, psychological for them or the opponent. I think it helps them big time.
I think it helps Pekka Rinne. I think you saw
Right.
that. He was
Good
a
point,
much calmer guy, period. He was a different looking goalie. He didn't crumble after Gensel's goal, which was kind of an unusual quick reaction goal. He got right back in there. He made some good saves. And the bottom line is I think they harness the energy from that crowd and don't overskate, try to make plays that aren't there. They seem to have figured out how to channel that into good, confident hockey.
No. See, I agree with Richie. I mean, Washington and Columbus were better atmospheres. No, I'm just teasing. I mean, like Andrew said, they're 8-1 there. So, I don't know if it's the crowd noise or whatever. They're comfortable there.
Richie said Ottawa was the black hole. I think was one of his
Rennie is comfortable there. They're kind of comfortable there. But you know what? If they're going to win it all, they got to figure out how to win here one time.
Yep, those guys were on their feet the entire pregame skate, which is amazing.
Bob, you liked Martina McBride, right? You were big into that.
No, I would prefer Jeff Jimerson. I think that was when that happened. I thought, oh, Nashville's done. They made the wrong choice. They built this up, and now she came and laid an egg. But
she's not a terrible singer, and I could barely hear the actual national anthem where I was watching the game, and everyone was like, "Geez, what happened there?"
It's like they just told her 2 minutes ahead of time. She got out there and started singing, and she didn't prepare. Anyway,
Richie just tweeted, San Jose was much louder last year.
We got to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the Pirates, who won again today, 11 more runs. Andrew McCutcheon's off the schneid. Should he stay at number 6? And we'll get into replay. Has it gone too far? There was a thing that happened today that made me go crazy. We'll ask these guys as well. That's coming up next right here on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown.